Hey, Eagle fans, I'm Thomas Mott. Welcome to Philadelphia Eagles Now here on a Wednesday where we thought we'd have a lot to talk about in terms of like big trade news, and yet we have one little tiny trade and then some interesting trade, I guess, details, as well as some free agents the Eagles could go ahead and sign if they wanted to add anybody. But essentially, all that hype about will the Eagles trade somebody, will they not, turned out to basically just be hype, and that happens at the trade deadline. It was true that they were shopping people and they were taking phone calls, but it's hard to get deals done. We talked about that in the videos yesterday, that, cap space and draft picks and, the way the contracts work out is tough to do, and sure enough, it didn't necessarily happen. So the one trade they did make, we'll get that started with, is for a cornerback, and it's Kary Vincent Jr. And you go, okay, Broncos cornerback, Kary Vincent Jr., Thomas, who's that? Well, he's not really done much, and he's not really known for anything, as he's a 7th-round draft pick out of LSU in this previous draft, like literally in 2021. So you first immediately go, why did the Eagles trade for a guy who they could have drafted in last year's draft? I mean, they passed on this guy multiple times. They had his 6th and 7th round draft pick in order to essentially bring him on to be a project cornerback, I guess. And honestly, I think that's kind of the plan right now in Philadelphia. They gave up a 6th round draft pick to do so. Not necessarily anything special there, because obviously the Eagles have tons of draft picks overall. And so it's a quiet move, but it's a move, I think, that you look towards the future and hope that maybe one day he could become a decent cornerback for the Philadelphia Eagles. NFL.com's Lance Zierlein had a whole draft mock-up, draft write-up on KVJ, as they're calling him right now, before the NFL draft, so you get a little peek or preview as to what he potentially could become. We'll throw that up on the screen right now. Quote, slot corner with average size but exceptional speed and athleticism. You can see his draft stock rise given his workout potential. Vincent has the hips, feet, and burst to stay tight with routes as a pro, but only if he shows marked improvement with pattern recognition in his coverage technique. He's played and practiced against NFL-caliber competition and brings a full resume of experience against quality competition. His best football could be ahead of him, but he needs to fully transition from athlete to cornerback for that to happen, end quote. So again, project, maybe he can eventually become good, maybe he won't. There's no guarantee here, and I think that's kind of how you should take this trade in terms of basically a grain of salt, right? He's not going to compete for a cornerback slot. There are other cornerbacks ahead of him. Philadelphia drafted one much higher in the draft who's sitting back there in terms of potentially being a starting cornerback. If, let's say, Steven Nelson got hurt, Zach McPherson would go ahead and slot right in there. But it's a move that I think the Eagles probably liked him from the start, weren't able to get him in the draft for whatever reason, and then saw an opportunity to go ahead and make a move for Denver and made the trade. So it's a, low risk, high reward sort of thing. 6th round draft pick isn't necessarily that big of a deal, and they must have at least done a little bit of research on him over the course of the season during, practices and stuff like that in order to figure out that they wanted him on the roster. However, it's not the big move that we wanted, and so I'll ask you guys this with a pinned comment down below. Were you upset the Eagles didn't make any big moves? If you were, type Y down below for yes. If you were not, then go ahead and type N down below for no. Now, the big move that we talked about in yesterday's video that potentially could have been the blockbuster deal we were hoping for was Fletcher Cox being moved. And now the Eagles did not trade Fletcher Cox. Fletcher Cox posted on his Instagram a picture of himself in Eagles uniform saying, Philly forever. But according to reports by the Inquirer and Jeff McLean, the Eagles aggressively tried to trade Fletcher Cox. They tried to go ahead and make a deal happen all the way up to the 4 p.m. deadline and were unable to do so. As Jeff McLean said, there were, quote, too many obstacles, I don't know why I said that weird, obstacles for a deal to get done. Well, he did mention in his article that trade talks could be revisited in 2022 because Cox is signed through 2022, and so if Philly wants to get rid of him, then they can still definitely, do so. Now, Bleeding Green Nation has a really good write-up on the Cox situation, which we talked about again yesterday, how hard it would be to go ahead and make a deal happen, but Bleeding Green Nation kind of gives you the future impact right now of keeping Fletcher Cox. Quote, the Eagles should have had the foresight to not show more commitment to Cox, a player clearly in decline. Though Cox might have some fair gripes about his usage in Jonathan Gannon's system, there's ample reason to believe he's not an elite defensive maker anymore. It's quite possible his high snap count has taken a toll on him. Cox has lost 7,818 career snaps. Contrast that with Brandon Graham's 6,211 career snaps, and consider that Graham is 2 years older and entered the NFL 2 seasons earlier. Instead of potentially getting, say, a future second-round pick for Cox, the Eagles might have to settle for less for a player with just 2 sacks in his last 12 games, end quote. Now, I'm going to be honest, listen, after doing a lot of research and trying to figure it out, I was hoping for a Cox trade, and I think Bleeding Green Nation is correct to say that Cox is a player in decline. He's still a good player. He's still one of the better D tackles in the league, but he's past the days of being, the best player on the field on every single snap. Like, he still makes an impact, and he still can be, the best D tackle in Philadelphia, and he has been probably in Philadelphia history for a very, very long time. Obviously, you talk about other defensive tackles in the past, but Cox has been fantastic, but the regression is there. Now, I get the reason why they couldn't really trade him, because you have to go ahead and burn a lot of dead cap money. You essentially are paying for draft picks, but you'd at least get something in return. And they already kind of tipped their cap into saying that they were gonna, move on from him in the future by drafting Milton Williams so high in the 2021 NFL draft. So again, I'm not surprised the deal wasn't made, but I am a little bit bummed that they couldn't figure out how to go ahead and move off of him. But whenever you make that contract restructuring, as you saw just a couple of months ago, and made it virtually impossible to go ahead and do so. And we talked about that here on the channel. So I really wanted, a wide receiver. I really wanted them to potentially go out and bring in a linebacker, unable to do both of those things. And so we're left with the current roster that we currently have. Now, there are ways to improve the roster. We'll talk about that here coming up in just 1 second. First, though, we shout out to our friends at BetUS. Go to chatsports.com/EaglesBet. Use the promo code Eagles125. Get that 125% deposit bonus whenever you first sign up. And bet on my new picks of the week. Here they are. Here's where we're going. With my picks, we're going to get back in the green right now. Cincinnati -2.5 versus the Browns. The Browns are an absolute dumpster fire right now. Cincinnati is going to bounce back after that tough loss to the Jets. I like the Bengals on the road. I will pick Philadelphia +2. I'm surprised it's not, more. I'm surprised it's not Philadelphia +4 because the Chargers, even though they lost last week, are still pretty good. But I'm going to take the Eagles. Hopefully I'm not, losing money betting Philly. Right now, the Packers-Chiefs is a pick'em. That line's going to change due to the fact that Aaron Rodgers is out officially on Sunday due to a positive COVID-19 test. And so I think the line's going to shift to a more in favor of the Chiefs, meaning I'm betting the Packers. I think the Packers roster is still great despite Aaron Rodgers. I think Jordan Love's going to play well. Give me the Packers on the road. I'm not buying into the Chiefs defense at all. I like the Patriots-Panthers over 41 points. I think a lot of people think it's going to be a low-scoring game. I'm going to take the over in that one, and I'll take the under in Broncos-Cowboys. Over-under was 49.5. Give me the under in that one. Denver's defense is still very good, despite the fact they went ahead and traded away Von Miller. So those are my picks of the week. You guys want to jump in on these bets, you can do it at chatsports.com/EaglesBet. Promo code is Eagles125. Okay, there are some free agent targets that we must at least mention if you wanted to go out and sign somebody. There are plenty of people, or plenty of teams that will sign people after the trade deadline, and we'll just throw them up on the screen right now. You have John Brown, the wide receiver, is a possible target. I really thought Philadelphia would make a move for one of those cheaper wide receivers, N'Keal Harry, James Washington. We throw away, OBJ, Devontae Parker. They're not able to get a wide receiver, so you throw in a name like John Brown. Eagle fans will ask, and I got DMs about it yesterday, Deshaun Jackson, who was cut by the Rams yesterday, released, I guess you'd say, by the Rams. It's an interesting thought, but I'm done with Deshaun Jackson. Like, we brought him back, and I was very excited the second time, and then he had a couple of games where it's like, wow, he's back, he's in form himself, and then you see that Deshaun Jackson has like one good game a year, and the rest of the time he's either injured or hardly playing, and so I'm out on Deshaun Jackson. Even though a deep threat would be nice, but in reality, Quez Watkins is supposed to be that guy, and I'd rather have Quez Watkins than, a 50-year-old Deshaun Jackson. He's not that old, but obviously he is a little bit up there in age. If they do sign somebody, though, we will have it fully covered here, and we'll make sure you guys are subscribed, as we always say, because we have plenty of great videos coming up, despite the fact they didn't make any trade deadline moves. So if you're new to the channel, you guys want to stay up to date on the Eagles, go down below and hit that subscribe button. Other possible names, again, we thought about the Eagles trade away Miles Sanders. Would that be a possibility? They did not. Todd Gurley looms out there as one of the only remaining free agent running backs if you needed to add somebody. Although we're very confident in Jordan Howard. I feel really good about Howard and Boston Scott. I actually, a little fun fact side note, I have Derrick Henry in my fantasy league. I'm winning my fantasy league. I'm the #1 seed. Derrick Henry's done now. First person I signed was Boston Scott. He will start on Sunday for me against the Chargers. I think they're going to use Boston Scott a lot. He saw 2 touchdowns on Sunday, had 18 points. So I feel fine with their current running backs, and I'm not worried about bringing in an extra back if you needed someone like a Todd Gurley. And finally, there's Benardrick McKinney, the inside linebacker, formerly of the Dolphins, who was released before this season. We talked a little bit about them possibly trading for a linebacker, trading away one of their linebackers. I don't think they'll sign McKinney either, but he was a Pro Bowler in 2018. He's only 28 years old, and so potentially could be an option there if Philadelphia needed to go ahead and sign somebody. But I really don't see them going out and doing anything. I think that they made some calls. I think they received some calls at the trade deadline, but in the end, they liked what they had. And honestly, you got to think, the Joe Flacco trade and the Zach Ertz trade were technically their trade deadline moves. They just didn't wait until the deadline to do so. So I think that they did a good job, and I'm not too worried about it. Although, again, a wide receiver I think would have been a nice addition, but they didn't do it. So now we wait and see what happens with the rest of this season, which we, of course, will have covered here on the channel as we are running out of time here on today's video. So one more time, make sure you guys are subscribed to Philadelphia Eagles Now. We have plenty of great content coming up next couple of days and weeks, including getting you ready for the Charger matchup on Sunday, where if they can get a win at home, and they've stunk at home this year, if they can get a win at home, they can jump back into really the playoff hunt, as they're really just one game out of the 7th seed in the NFC wildcard, despite how bad they've been over the past couple of weeks. So we'll see what happens. We'll obviously cover it here on the channel. For Philadelphia Eagles Now, I'm your host, Thomas Mott, as we are out of time, and we sign off. You guys stay safe out there. Enjoy the rest of your day.